The man standing here is clearly a CEO worth billions, yet he dressed up like a homeless man and returned to the village, all because he had just found his long-lost sister. And that sister happened to be working at one of his company's factories, doing hard labor. To test his sister's character, he deliberately disguised himself as a poor man to meet her. After recognizing each other, they hugged with excitement. Then the sister brought the CEO back to her home. The CEO cautiously said he would rely on her from now on. To his surprise, she immediately frowned. Then she quietly walked out of the house. Just when the brother thought his sister was greedy and materialistic, the next morning, unexpectedly, she came home carrying 2 fish. She smiled and said she would take him to find a job. Although the brother was very confused, he still followed her to the factory's interview office. The sister placed the 2 fish on the interviewer's desk. The interviewer immediately understood her intention. He directly arranged for the CEO to move bricks. The CEO was utterly shocked. Why was there no interview or health check? But the next second, he found out why. The interviewer pulled a stack of cash out from inside the fish. It turned out each fish represented $2,000. The CEO was furious. There were actually bribed people under his company. He immediately accused the interviewer of abusing power. The sister, seeing this, was shocked. Although in her heart she thought her brother was impressive, on the surface she kept apologizing to the interviewer. After all, her brother really needed this job, but the interviewer was already angered. He immediately called the factory director. The sister tried hard to push the fish to the director, but the director flatly refused. Yet not because he was honest or fair, but because the fish weren't enough. After saying that, the director called all the workers together. He hypocritically said he had good news to announce, that their factory had just taken on $1 million order. They were about to make a fortune, so each worker had to pay the price of 3 fish. The sister suddenly felt awkward. The factory had already owed her 6 months of wages. She had no money for 3 fish at all. The CEO beside her grew even more furious. The director even dared to withhold the workers' pay, so when no one was watching, he secretly called his secretary. He told the secretary to rush over for an unannounced inspection. The secretary, after receiving the order, immediately hurried to the factory. Meanwhile, the director beat up the resisting CEO. To protect the CEO, the sister was knocked unconscious. Just then, a phone call came to the director. It turned out they had gotten word in advance that the company headquarters secretary would be coming to inspect the factory. The director thought the secretary was coming for the $3 million order, so he immediately ordered his men to prepare for the reception. Then he specially told them to hide the CEO and his sister. They must not let the secretary find out about their abuse. So the CEO and his sister were locked in a storage room. The CEO worried his sister's life might be in danger. He immediately told the security guard his true identity, but the guard didn't believe him at all. He just shut the door and left the storage room. Meanwhile, on the other side, the secretary finally arrived at the factory gate. The director exaggeratedly called all the workers to welcome the secretary. The secretary, seeing this scene, was annoyed. He was just there to do his job. Why call so many people over? But the director misunderstood his words. He thought the secretary simply preferred receiving gifts in private. So he led the secretary to his office. The director had prepared a table full of lavish food for the secretary and warmly handed him a file envelope. Inside was $100,000. The secretary immediately felt insulted. The factory was corrupted to such an extent. He angrily questioned the director. What do the workers usually eat? The director was terrified. He quickly told the truth, that workers usually only ate bread and potatoes. But the secretary was even more horrified than the director. Does that mean the CEO has also only eaten bread and potatoes these past 2 days? The director realized the seriousness of the problem. He immediately called the interviewer in to answer the question. The clueless interviewer indeed told the truth, that new workers weren't even qualified to eat bread and potatoes. They could only eat leftovers from others. The secretary grew even angrier. The director took the chance to push all the blame onto the interviewer. He ordered the interviewer to get lost immediately, then pretended to sincerely admit his fault. He told the secretary the cafeteria would definitely be reformed. The secretary no longer wanted to talk to the director. He only wanted to find the CEO now. Just then, noises suddenly came from outside the office. The secretary immediately asked the director what was going on. The panicked director explained it was just a mad dog barking, but the secretary didn't believe him. He insisted on checking it out himself. The director couldn't stop him. The secretary pushed open the storage room door and saw a shocking scene. He immediately rushed forward to help the CEO. The director beside them was stunned. Why was the secretary calling this worker the CEO? The CEO, anxious to take his sister to the hospital, ignored the director. The secretary coldly told the director the truth. The director collapsed onto the ground. He said he'd repent to God for 100 years to beg for the CEO's forgiveness. But the CEO gave him no such chance. At that moment, the director still didn't know that he would spend every single future day suffering in prison.